I mean, who wants to just sit by the pool? Maybe there's a few folks out there that would just thrive with that, but even if you think that's you, I don't think so because we human beings are meant to climb new mountains, explore new areas, take on new challenges. And so, but that's a beautiful thing. If you can spend your time, you can decide ahead of time, this is how I want to spend my time, and this is how I don't want to spend my time, and be the master of that domain. It's a beautiful place to exist.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. Very excited for this week's guest, Mr. Brian Tibbs. Brian, how are you doing today?
I am doing good and so excited to be here with you today, Phil. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Brian. You have a really interesting story and background, so I want to get into it, but just to introduce you here a little bit. First, Brian's mission is on a mission to serve people using his skills and experience to build wealth. He's the author of a book, The Hacker Method. And, you know, what really stands out to me, Brian, is just this mission to serve people. It's kind of in you. It's been a part of your life for a long time. You were the CEO of a nonprofit, lived in South America for a long time, too, so I want to hear about that. So whether we start there or we get there and there's a backstory to that even, tell me just your backstory and how you became who you are today.
Yeah. So I grew up in a family. My dad owned his own business, and his dad owned his own business, and so I grew up in that entrepreneurial family to where at the dinner table we would talk about profit and loss and that kind of stuff. So I grew up in that environment. And now I didn't grow up. Real estate was not something that we did. My dad had his own small business. So I remember when I was 16 or 17, a conversation between my grandfather and my dad where they were going to go buy a duplex. And I was 16 years old, something like that. And I just thought, that's just crazy. Why would you go buy a house, let somebody, a stranger, live in it, hope they pay you the rent, then you have to pay the bank, and they're going to call you at 11 o'clock to come unclog a toilet, that kind of stuff. I just thought it was insane. And they walked me through the process, and they showed me, we're going to do all this. We're going to put $20,000 down, all this stuff, and we're going to make $50 a month. And I thought, $50 a month? What in the world are you talking? And they were like, well, it's not just that. It's the debt pay down. It's the appreciation. It's all this stuff. And we're not going to unclog toilets. We're going to hire a manager and blah, blah, blah. And then when I saw that they could double or triple their money over the course of 10 years or whatever it was, a light bulb turned on in my mind. And I decided right then and there, okay, I think I want to be a real estate investor. Then when I went to college, I started to realize everybody that I knew that was, 40, 50, 60 years old that had a lot of money, they were real estate investors. Now, whether they had a different career and moved their money into real estate or they were just in real estate, they had money. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be a real estate investor. That was in college. So at 19 years old, instead of renting a house with my buddies, I bought a house. I bought a duplex and I rented out the other side. I rented out the extra bedroom in my house on my side to friends to just try not to have to pay a mortgage or pay rent, right?
Yep.
And then I set a goal that, okay, I'm going to buy a unit or two every year for the rest of my life. And over the next few years, I got myself up to 10 units and then had a crisis in my life, if you will. I was, 26 years old. And I felt like I was supposed to give it all up and move halfway across the world and do some charity work. So I went through my church. I moved to Guatemala with my new wife, sight unseen, in 2005. Moved to Guatemala. We thought we were going to be there for a year or two. Ended up staying for 16 years. And all the while, kind of changed my focus 100% away from business and real estate to running the nonprofit. But I still kind of kept one corner of one eye on the real estate and continued to develop it because I knew that the nonprofit work was not going to provide us a massive salary and no retirement. So I needed to take care of that for myself. And
Yeah.
so that gets you up to about 2021 when we came back from that work.
Awesome. Well, I want to come back to the Guatemala and just kind of what you learned there a little bit. Before that, I just want to point out that when you were younger, you referenced real estate, but also in college, you paid attention, and I think that's so important. So, if
Yeah.
it's around wealth or relationships or anything, I think make your observations, like listen to people, ask people questions, but also just pay attention. You said you paid attention to other people in their 40s, whatever age they were, and it validated your thought process and what you were hearing. So I think there's something to be learned from that. Just pay attention to other people. Are they happy? Are they not happy? What are they doing? Things like that. You can learn a lot from that. Before we jump to a few years ago when you came back, tell me about the experience a little bit in Guatemala, and like how did that shape you and how did it shape your mindset?
Yeah. Wow. Very profoundly. So we spent 1 year in Guatemala, then we moved to Argentina, 2.5 years there. Then we moved to Peru, 5 years there. Moved to Ecuador, 4 years there. Moved to Brazil, a couple years there. So we've kind of been all over the place. But living in South America, every culture, when you are born and raised in a culture and you never leave a culture, it's just that's it. That's normal. That's the reality. When you experience multiple cultures, you begin to look at the world in a multi-dimensional way. So I can look at the world as an American. I understand how Americans see the world. I understand how entrepreneurs see the world. And I can look at the world as a Latino as well, because I was so immersed in it, I began to take on some of the qualities of that. And it's interesting to be able to look at one issue from this angle and then kind of pivot and look at it from a different angle. And you can actually appreciate multiple opinions on the exact same thing because of the backgrounds that you've been exposed to. So I would say
Yeah.
that's what has shaped my mindset the most, that I can sympathize with people in a way that maybe I wasn't able to in the past because I only had that one-dimensional view of the world.
Man, that's the word that comes to mind for me is perspective. And we talk about,
Yeah.
first of all, I'm on the opposite side of that. I mean, I'm from a small town, have lived here most of my life, went to the city for a little bit, but the city is little Columbus, Ohio, so it's not like I've traveled a little bit and I've seen some different cultures, but I've not lived it. I've not been immersed in it like you have, where you start to pick up the values and the traits. And honestly, I think you're exposed to the values and traits there, which then helps you recognize the difference, and you can be, I think, disciplined about what you choose, and you just have a better understanding of what you're choosing and what you're not, I think. So that's where just learning things, whether that's from books, from other people, or from literally moving around the world, can give you such good perspective. Um, and I think understanding and empathizing it, just what would you say about, like, what are the major differences that you
Yeah.
learned from just the U.S. and South America? Like, what's like, holy cow, it's just so different, and people don't understand it. Maybe I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, here's the biggest thing that just pops into my mind right now. America really is the land of opportunity. That's not just a cliche. Now, I don't know what it's like in Europe or in China or in Japan. I don't know. I don't have that perspective. I haven't spent enough time in those places to really understand. But in Latin America, the system is not built to support the entrepreneur. In the United States, at least right now, it is still built to support the entrepreneur. Not completely unchecked. There are things that you've got to do to comply with rules and regulations. But everywhere I turn here, there's an opportunity to expand my life, whether it's in the realm of health or faith or business or in my family or my community. And in other parts of the world, the system isn't built for that. The system is to really kind of keep everybody at this basic, subsistence level, survival level, and that's why there's very few mega rich at the top and masses at the bottom, and that exists because of how the system is set up.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening right now, if you're saying, well, when's my boat going to come in? When's my train going to come in?
Yeah.
You just got to learn how to recognize opportunities and grab them and take them because the system is set up for you here
Yeah.
in the United States.
And what I was going to say is exactly how you kind of close that discussion out, is that if you're saying I don't have the opportunities, they're not out there, I can't, you just haven't figured them out yet.
Yeah,
But
right.
the system is in place. If you're we do have some international listeners, by the way. I don't know where they're coming from. I could go look that up. Um, but the system, if you're in the United States, the system is set up for you to be successful. You have the resources, you can figure it out. You just haven't figured out how to do it yet. If you haven't, and maybe you have figured that out. But I also have heard that from, there's actually a buddy of mine that hopefully he'll be listening, so I'll have to test him here to see if I get a text from him or anything. But he's from South America, from Brazil, and he would say the same thing. His family had a business there. He's here, and he's like, the opportunities here are just so incredible. And then another buddy of mine is from South Africa, and he's been here for quite some time. He said people just don't understand how much opportunity here is, and as you said, it's the land of opportunity. So, which brings us to kind of a great transition to, talking about financial opportunity, because you came back in 2021. I don't know what the real estate path or just the financial path was during that time. I do know you didn't make a lot of money in what you were spending your time on in the missionary work. So what did the financial strategy and like mindset and growth of that, how did that evolve while you were there and into when you came back?
Yeah, so I've just always had the mindset of we are going to be aggressive on investing, and we're going to be very lean on spending as a family. And so if you took the total amount of money that I was paid on my W-2 pay stubs from the nonprofit and divided it into the number of hours that my wife and I worked in our nonprofit, we made $9.20 an hour average. Well, we made more at the end, but we made much less at the beginning, over those 16 years.
Wow.
And most people would say, there's no way you could build wealth with that kind of an income, but we did, because we like I said, we kind of refused to play the consumer game where we got to have a massive house with a huge rent payment or a mortgage payment. We got to have a brand new car or two on the maximum loan payments possible. We're going to rack up credit card. So we just always lived well below our means, and those were meager. And I remember when we were coming back after 16 years of working with all these international leaders and different people in the nonprofit world, and one of the guys sat me down and said, like, well, I'm worried about you. What are you guys going to do next? And there's two rules in mission work. You don't talk about money or politics, right? And here this guy's asking me about money, and I figure, well, I'm on my way out, so I might as well. And I basically said, listen, we're financially independent. We don't need another job. I'm not going to go get another job. We're just going to go home and then we'll figure it out. And he was dumbfounded. And he began to drill into that a little bit more, and he totally lost the social taboo of talking about money and started asking me details. And he said, how did you do it? Like, I know you didn't make a lot of money. Almost like, were you stealing money from the nonprofit kind of a thing, right? And I was like, well, we decided that we were gonna like live on half of our income and invest the other half, and that's just the way we lived. He goes, how in the world did you do that? And I didn't really know how to answer him. And then because I'd never taken it out of my head and explained it to anybody. I just, the process evolved over the years. And he said, do you think you could teach me how to do it? And I was like, well, I would have to sit down and think about how I did it. And that's what gave birth to me writing the book, The Hacker Method. And the subtitle is The Unexpected Investor's Guide to Building Wealth, Even on Limited Income. And that's my story. Like, you wouldn't expect me, the guy that's out doing church planting, to be a real estate investor. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people out there that maybe have just a normal job and they're just out there living their lives, that they are unexpected investors, but they want to break free from the paycheck to paycheck trap. And so that's why I wrote the book that kind of broke down the processes that I've developed over the years on very meager income to build a multi-million-dollar net worth that is now paying all of our bills.
So while you were, first of all, that's phenomenal. And I think you built your investment in cash flow and like your freedom, if you will, while you were doing mission work at $9 an hour from across the world.
Right.
But with investments in the U.S., correct?
Yes, correct. Yes.
But just, again, going back to the earlier point, like, do we have opportunity? If you're listening to this, you're probably making more than $9 an hour, and you're probably located somewhere in the U.S. where you have a lot of opportunity. And, there's market dynamics and all kinds of things, but at the same time, there is opportunity. Yep. I just wanted to put that in context. I want to talk about like what are some of the high level things from the hacker method, like whether that's real estate investing or just financial, just personal financials and managing that expenses, whatever that might be. What are some of the major themes that you want to, just major points you would want to
Yeah.
convey?
Yeah, great question. So I think if I could boil the entire book down to a concept that everybody can grasp and needs to understand on building wealth, especially if you're on constrained income. Listen, if you're making $400,000 a year, you can build a multi-million dollar net worth with just a little bit of discipline, right? If you're making less than $100,000 a year, listen up. So the whole concept of building wealth is the same as forming diamonds. If you've ever heard how diamonds form, it takes two elements. It takes lots of time and it takes lots of pressure. So diamonds come from coal or carbon. So if you have a lump of carbon sitting on the surface of the earth and it's not under any pressure, it could sit there for a million years. It's still going to be carbon. But if you take carbon and you put it in an area where there's lots of pressure, heat and weight and all this stuff, crushing it down over long periods of time, it becomes something very valuable. It becomes a crystal, a diamond. The same thing is true in wealth building. It takes a lot of time. And there's a lot of gurus out there who are talking about how you can become a gazillionaire overnight. That's garbage. Unless you win the lottery, which you might as well hope to get struck by lightning, you're not going to become a gazillionaire overnight. It takes time. And it takes pressure. In our context in wealth building, pressure is getting strong returns on your investment. You can't just stick your money in a savings account and get 0.001% returns and think that putting money in there, even if you put 100% of your paycheck in there, you're not going to build a multi-million dollar net worth over time. You have to have time and pressure. The pressure is constantly seeking how can I get a better return on my investment. You're going to maybe start with CDs that feel safe, and then you're going to migrate to the stock market and maybe have a diversified portfolio where you're going to get 7 to 10% return. Then you're going to say, hey, I can get 15 to 20% in real estate. Or, hey, if I start investing in my own small business, I can get 50, 60% returns. So you just need to begin to build a strategy where I'm going to seek out stronger and stronger returns on my investment. That's the concept of the hacker method, coupled with, in order to make significant investments every single month out of the paychecks that you are receiving, you have to refuse to live in the consumer lifestyle. Like I mentioned earlier, the average home in 1950 was 920 square feet. Today,
Yeah.
every single person in the household, if you take the size of our homes divided by the number of people in our house, is 920 square feet. So every single person is demanding the same size of house as 1950. So we just continue to consume and more, and I deserve this, and I got to have the brand new car, and my wife has to have a brand new car, and since we can't pay cash, we're going to put it on payments. Just stop living that kind of a lifestyle. And one thing that I love to tell new investors is if you have your spending account and you have your investing account is also a spending account. It's just a future spending account. And if you do it right, it'll be 10 times bigger than that amount today. So find a little bit of discipline. Don't live the consumer lifestyle, live the investor lifestyle, and you'll be a multimillionaire and be financially free and get out of the paycheck to paycheck trap.
And so what about the, living below your means? You talked about a little bit earlier, and I wanted to hit on this, and then just I'm glad you brought up like the example of the 900 square foot, because I think you could say that because of the general wealth in the United States,
Yeah.
right? Like the general wealth has grown so much, and with that has grown spending. But what about like how do you, I guess maybe how has your relationship with spending money changed over time, what relative to your wealth growth? Because like, are you going to like when do you get to enjoy that, or how? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And I think from a faith perspective, money flows through us, right? Like the mindset of money flows through us. So how do you think about that as well?
Yeah. So we got so good at living frugally and hacking our lifestyle. So that's the first section of the book, is hacking your lifestyle, to where we house hacked, meaning I refuse to pay rent and refuse to pay a mortgage. I want other people to pay my rent or pay my mortgage. And so we would have a building where we could rent a portion of the building out, so that we would live for free in our houses. So,
Right.
you know,
Right.
people, my formula for wealth building is 50% of your income is for spending, 40% is for investing, and 10% is to give away to make the world a better place, right? We're blessed. Even if you don't make a ton of money, you're still blessed. Compare your income to the rest of the world and you are in the top 10, 20%, somewhere in that realm. So you're blessed. So you need to be able to give away to make the world a better place. That that 40%, people say there's no way I could ever invest 40% of my paycheck. Listen up. Most Americans pay around 30% of their income for their housing. If you can figure out how to house hack and get somebody else to cover your mortgage, there's 30%. Most people have car payments. They're paying interest on that. About 8 to 10% of our paychecks go to the interest and the fees on car loans.
Right.
Most people carry some credit card balance. That could be the balance of that. If you get rid of your credit card balances, stop paying car payments, and house hack, that's 40% of your income right there. Take that money and invest it. You'll be a multimillionaire in a matter of time, right? No matter what you're making. Now, that didn't really answer your question. Could you ask your question?
No, I think you did. I think you hit on it. And I like the 50, 40, 10, and just, you're not saying, first, you're not saying save, save, save only. You're saying save and then invest, save, then invest. And you're pumping money then really in different ways back into the economy. And I like the 10% giving.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to come back to is, so you just talked about the pressure element, right? Strong returns on investments, and there's an evolution of what we can invest in, right? So from, you didn't say savings, the savings account, 0.5%, 1%, whatever, or less, CDs to stocks to real estate to maybe active real estate to small business. What is your guidance on the evolution of that? Because we have people that are on the beginning of that and the end of that right now. Tell me more about that.
So, each individual needs to decide what's right for them. And I remember your earlier question is how has my spending shifted? Right. How has my mindset on spending shifted? And I will say that we are spending 2 or 3 times more than we were before we got to that level where our investments were covering our expenses. So we have gotten to that point, and this is the last chapter of my book. The last letter in Hacker. Hacker is an acronym, and the last letter is the letter R, which actually has 4 words, the last of which is reward. If you don't allow yourself to get to the point to where you're willing to take a reward, harvest some of the fruit that you've planted, then I think you have an unhealthy relationship with money, to where the hoarding of and the accumulation of money is so important that you're not even going to allow you and your family to enjoy some of the fruits of that labor. So I think it's extremely important for you to set goals, stop moving the goalposts to a certain extent, and begin to harvest some of that fruit. Like, who would plant a whole field of corn and then refuse to harvest it? That makes no sense. It's the same with wealth. It needs to be harvested. And if you're a person of faith, you can go and look in Scripture, and it's going to tell you that accumulating wealth and not enjoying the blessing that you've been given is like chasing after the wind. It's pointless, right? It's almost insulting to the blessing that you've received.
I suspected, based on your background, that you had you had a good answer for that, and I think that's excellent. And I love the reward part, because I just want to stay on that for a second, and then I'll come back to kind of the if you wanted to finish anything there, or the investment growth strategy. But the reward, I think there's a generational, the generational change here. I mean, you reference the size of the house. Our grandparents came off the Great Depression, right? And that mindset, I think, was like, there's so much scarcity mindset around money, and it's going to disappear. And I think we all deal with that in some different ways. But I think depending on the generation or age that people come from, they don't spend. They want to save it all, save it all, save it all. And they're so fearful of running out of money. And I think that's just ingrained from, history, honestly. But I think it's important to, when you get to the right point, to, I think there's a difference between consumption and over-consuming for where you're at. And consuming is good and it's healthy for the economy when you're at a point where you can do that. But if you're over-consuming relative to what you can afford, I think that's not dangerous. So I've thought about this some, and we live in a generally conservative area, so maybe even people will push back on that. But but G's and Pete's, like enjoy the fruits of your labor a little bit. And as you said, there's some scripture behind it too. So I appreciate you just weighing in on that and staying there a little bit. Yeah, were you going to add anything to that? Or otherwise, I'll jump to the investment growth
Yeah, no,
discussion.
yeah, and I think people who maybe feel guilty about rewarding themselves, if you're following the 50-40-10 and you're giving 10% of your income away the entire part of the journey, then you are being obedient to that part of what is asked of us. So enjoy the enjoy the 90% that you're allowed to enjoy. It doesn't mean don't be generous with it. I mean, don't be selfish with that. Use that 90% to benefit the people around you, your neighbors,
Right.
your community, your family, your loved
Yeah.
ones, your parents, your siblings, you know, spread it around and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Now in terms of growth strategy, whenever whenever I'm talking with somebody new, I have to understand that this world of investing is scary, right? Like if I put it in a savings account, it's guaranteed by the government not to disappear. And you're right. But you also have to ask yourself, is there anything else that I've ever done that was scary before I did it? Then once I did it, I look back and like, oh, what was I so scared of? Because we human beings are so risk averse. We're so afraid of that monster that might be in the closet that we never do the things that our logical brain tells us you need to do this in order to make progress. Like what I said earlier, if you just have a lump of carbon sitting on the top of the earth, sitting in a savings account, you are not going to build wealth. You might be, so you might sacrifice and tighten your belt and suffer for a long time and put your money in your savings account. If inflation is higher than your interest rate, you're losing purchasing power. I have a
Right.
chapter in my book called Saving Money is a Waste of Time because literally putting money in a savings account, it is
Yeah.
wasted away with time
Yeah.
because $100 dinner out with your spouse this year is going to cost 103 next year, and you only have 100.25 from your savings account,
Right.
right?
Right.
25 cents in interest. So
Yeah.
you have to get a better return than what the inflation is, and so you have to be willing. I also say people who are too afraid to make any kind of an investment that's going to get you a better return on investment may also have an unhealthy relationship with money. They have
Yeah.
such a tight grip on their money that they're not willing to let it go. That's called greed.
Yeah.
If you're willing to let go of some of that money, let it go out there to work for you. Don't be stupid. I'm not saying do foolish investments. I'm not saying do things without checking them out, but be willing to take a little bit of risk. Look at the historical performance of that investment and take a leap. And
Yeah.
if you make a mistake, learn from the mistake, don't repeat the mistake, and continually seek that higher and higher return on investment.
So, it's just interesting as you talk through the prior discussion, guilt, fear, greed, like there's so much emotion that drives
Yeah,
our behavior
yeah,
around money. And I think there's both understanding that is emotion, and like fear is not a bad thing as long as you recognize that it is just that. It's fear, and you got to think through and educate yourself on how to overcome that. And if you just, you know, like yes, there's risk with investing in different and new things, but what you can learn from honestly the good things and learn a little bit from the bad things. We don't want to lose money, but if
right,
we if we learn about if we just stay at the 0.5% or quarter whatever savings, you're not gonna build wealth long term.
right.
But if you get to the 4%, okay, that's pretty low risk. You just have to educate yourself a little bit and put it in an FDI, safe place. But then if you want to go to the next level, it takes education and a little bit of risk. And I was just size. I mean, you can also do a lot of these things with really small amounts of money to learn them,
Yeah,
but you got to progress through this and start to move to the kind of higher potential returns and really different invest in things that you're passionate about that are aligned with what you really want to be doing, and just kind of think through and again build your investment thesis for what works for you. So I want to kind of stay there and talk about that. So you figured out this wealth building journey, for yourself. You're able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. You're generous with the money that you've been able to generate. What are you focused on now? Like, how has that changed your mindset and approach to what you're focused on with your time?
yeah. So for all those of you out there who are chasing that fire, financial independence, retire early concept, if you are wired anything like me, that word retirement, what does that mean? When we came back in 2021 from overseas, I took a year off. I decided I'm going to take a year off. I'm not going to really do anything heavy lifting. I mean, I continued to kind of tweak with my investments and that kind of stuff, paying attention to it. But I
Can I
didn't.
guess? I'm going to cut you off on purpose. Sorry about that, but I'm going to guess like the over under on how long that lasted. Is that what we're doing here, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't a year. I'll just say that it wasn't a year, but
Yes.
I intentionally cut you off, but I'll let you keep going there.
Well, I had to do something, so that's when I started to write my book, and that was a great way to spend my time. And I actually doubled my portfolio in 18 months. And then I decided I'm going to triple it again. So that's what I'm working on now. Is that now I'm in the phase of tripling my portfolio from where it was when we came back to the U.S. Because now I got all this time on my hands, and I'm looking at all these assets that have equity in them. So I'm trying to become a better steward of the equity that's in the projects that I've got going on. So yeah, it didn't last very long, and I mean, who wants to just sit by the pool? Maybe there's a few folks out there that would just thrive with that, but even if you think that's you, I don't think so because we human beings are meant to climb new mountains, explore new areas, take on new challenges, and so. But that's a beautiful thing. If you can spend your time, you can decide ahead of time, this is how I want to spend my time, and this is how I don't want to spend my time, and be the master of that domain. It's a beautiful place to exist. To not
Yeah.
have the boss telling you what you do and don't have to do, and oh my goodness. And then you can start to make real progress. Think about the amount of time that you can intentionally spend with your loved ones, with your kids. My kids are getting older. I got one in college now. And so I'm constantly thinking about how can I spend quality time with my kids. And I have the freedom to do that. There's no boss telling me I got to go to Chicago for 3 days, right?
Yeah.
I can take my kid to Chicago for 3 days if I
Yeah.
want.
Yeah. And I like the comment about just human beings are wired to climb new mountains, discover new
Yeah.
things, have setbacks, grow, but having a growth
Yeah.
mindset for sure. But also, um, if you have the ability to be financially independent, like the FIRE movement, I don't even know if we've talked about it on the podcast, but the FIRE movement, if you have the ability to do that and you have the discipline and focus to get that done, you are never going to just retire and sit on a beach. That's
Right.
why I just laugh about it when you started to talk about it and I cut you off, is because there's no way
Yeah.
someone that's driven and disciplined like that is going to say, "Oh, I'm just going to retire early and do nothing." And you tried, so credit to you, but I knew you weren't going to be successful on that. But um, I want to go back to your goal for tripling, your portfolio. And now that you've kind of gotten to where you are, what is the motivator and the driver? Like how do you think about the driving force for money, for financial now? Is it about money or is it about something different for you?
Yeah, I want to. I mean, my background in the nonprofit world, it was all about making an impact. And that was probably the hardest thing for me to adjust to when we came back to the US is the question is why am I getting up in the morning and what am I working towards? And so my ultimate goal is I want to have a huge impact. And how do you have a huge impact with what I'm doing? Well, number one, I'm going to employ lots of people, provide good jobs, provide education on this is how you can do this, right? So I like for all of my staff as well, they're all invited to be a part of my community of budding investors, and I want them to join, even if that means they get to the point where they're going to quit because they've found financial freedom. I would celebrate that if a
Yeah.
staff member pulled themselves out of the paycheck to paycheck trap, even though I'm the one making them in the trap with the paycheck.
Right.
That would be extremely rewarding.
Yeah.
I want to use my real estate to do good things, and I'm actually just about to start a partnership with somebody to do sober living. And so we're going to invest in real estate that's going to house people that are in recovery. And that really touches my heart of service. And it has great cash flow. So, both of those things at the same time. I also want to build a legacy. I want to build something that is going to outlast me. It's not just a gravy train for my kids, But I do want to have, I want for the Tibbs family to have a lasting impact on this world. And the best way to do that is to have an engine that can fund whatever it is that we feel like is the most important thing to fund.
Man, and I could see your body language there getting excited as you were talking about that too. How much thought have you given to that lasting impact in building that engine and the approach to that? Because so I was at an event where David York, he wrote the book Entrusted, and he talks about like financial planning, but there was also some really good comments like, would you rather make 12% forever or have grateful kids, right? And there's obvious answers to some of those questions, but there's also whole life insurance. There's all kinds of strategies around how you do this, and balancing giving kids what they need, which is the right relationships. And if we talk about kids, what they need from a financial perspective, giving them the right relationship with money and how to make money and how not to lose money, not just give them money, right? It's teach a man to fish, don't. So how do you think about that balance of what you would give versus giving them opportunity is what I heard.
Yeah, for me, it's all about teaching them to fish. And I would go back and I would ask the question, has there ever been a father or a father and a mother that didn't want their kids to have more opportunity than they did? I can't imagine that you would say, nah, I wish that they had to struggle more.
Right.
So what I would like to see is, and I for sure have had opportunities. I've sprung board off of what my dad taught me. He sprung off of what his dad taught him, and it has produced really good human beings. And so I want for my kids to springboard off of me, not live on a trust fund. That's not what I'm interested in, but I'm interested in kind of building the family business and continuing to have more and more impact as each generation goes along. And the best way to guarantee that is to, I think you can get 10, 12, 15, 20% returns and have a fantastic relationship with your kids. And that's what my goal is. And I'm trying to nurture my kids. Now, if my kids want to become therapists and they want to take a W-2 job and they want to go down that route, or they want to be involved in the church somehow, I am not going to discourage that. And I'm not going to force them or coerce them to join the family business, but I'm going to give them the background and the tools to do what I've done, and I'm hoping that that produces the best version of them, that they can learn how to pick themselves up and make it happen themselves.
Man, and I that's exciting. And I think to go back to the evolution of investing a little bit is like, think about the evolution of Brian's investing from, making $9 an hour, investing whatever he could in whatever way he could, which you can't do a lot with it early on. And it just grew to CDs, to stocks, to real estate, to active, to business, to whatever. And now thinking about legacy and strategies to how to educate your family and others, not just, you didn't even mention that you wrote a book and you're helping a lot of other people. I'd say remove the barrier of financials from doing what you're really excited about doing. Like that's what you've done in a lot of ways is you have a giving heart. You proved that when you were in South America, and you're now using your means in other ways to do that. But just the evolution and the growth from figuring out how to earn money to now figuring out how to teach people to earn money and make it last. We haven't solved the problem, or we don't know yet if we've solved the problem of how do we make that money that we've made last for decades and decades and generations, right? So now you're focused on studying that. So I just love that. If you look ahead, kind of the next, few years in your business or your life, whatever, what is going to be the key contributor to your success?
I think hands down, it is me getting out of my own way, identifying the blind spots that are holding me back. And it's the same thing as the person who is resisting taking money out of their savings account and doing something with the potential for higher return. All of us are comfortable in certain areas. And I want to, and I'm working on this daily, push out of my own self-imposed boundaries. And even though I don't have to, like I could wind a bunch of this stuff down and just live comfortably the rest of my life. But I don't want to. I want to grow. I want to experience new things. I want to try things that are scary. And I'm doing that on a regular basis. And it's almost, sure, I'll make mistakes, and I am making mistakes on occasion. But I always look back, and now I've got new information. I've got new knowledge. I've got new skills. and that makes me feel stronger and more impactful and more able. And so that's what I want to do. I want to get out of my own way. I want to push forward to a new frontier that I've never tested before, and I want to grow. I want to get better at what I'm doing. I want to chase higher and higher returns, and I want to invest heavily in the people around me that I love.
Man, Brian, that's excellent. And I think I love, get out of your own way, and just so many of us put self-imposed boundaries on us, not just financial, but in a lot of different ways. So I think everyone, certainly myself as well, can relate to that. So I appreciate it. If you step back and reflect, think about just what you've done, both with your time overseas in South America, your investing career, your growth, the impact you're having, your employees, everything. If you step back and reflect, how does what you do? How does it make you feel?
Good question. Um, I'm grateful, and I try to reflect on this daily. What am I grateful for? I would say if I took all of that and lumped it in, I think I am grateful for kind of a hunger to, human beings, we are explorers. I mean, we got in boats and went around the oceans. Then we got in spaceships and went to the moon. We are explorers. And I think I'm most grateful for that spirit of what's over that peak? What's over there? Being willing to take a risk because it's scary. There might be a bear on the other side of that peak, right? And go ahead and take a look over and then take a step over and then get into the new valley and realize, oh, wow, there was a lot more for me here than what was in the past. I would say that's what I'm most grateful for.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that answer. I love it. Love everything about it. And you can see that you've had the hunger. You've even tested trying to get rid of the hunger with the beach. The
Yeah,
1 year plan beach.
wasn't fulfilling.
I mean, right? We're not made for that. So,
Short bits of that are fantastic, but living like that, oh my goodness, no thanks.
Yeah, that's a good clarification too, because I do agree with that. What's the most impactful book that you've read?
I would say, that there it's a little bit older now. Good to Great.
Yeah.
The Collins, I can't remember his
Yeah,
first.
Jim Collins.
Jim Collins, yeah. That and Built to Last, kind of that series, but Good
Yep.
to Great was even better than Built to Last.
Yeah.
I still use those concepts day to day, not just in business, but in my own life, like how I'm running
Right.
my own life.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
just
interesting.
great.
It's interesting you say that, because I read that as a business book for
Hmm.
even when I was in the corporate world a long time ago. But there's so many principles in there that aren't just business principles, but you
Yep.
can apply to your life. So,
Yep.
Good to Great by Jim Collins. No matter where you're at in your career investing journey, wealth building journey, whatever it is, that's a great recommendation. So, Brian, this has been great. I appreciate it so much. I mean, just again, all the good work you've done in general. You've added a lot of value from expenses to investing to mission work to kind of purpose and why you're investing and hiring people, and the sober living. Just a lot of great information here. Where can our listeners find out more about you?
Yeah, so if anybody listening has resonated with what I'm saying, how to break free from the paycheck to paycheck trap, build a multi-million-dollar net worth, even if you're not making a ton of money, go to theunexpectedinvestor.com/community and check that out and see if you're a good fit. There's kind of a few questions there. It says, if you like this, and if you like this, if you like this, then you might be a good fit for the community. And my passion not only is investing in real estate, but it's investing in people. And I would love nothing more than for someone in my community to come to me and say, hey, Brian, I just crossed the millionaire mark. I would be thrilled. But you can also find me on social media at Unexpected Investor on all the social media channels as well.
Ryan, thanks so much. That's great. And yeah, I think I think a big part of growing yourself and growing your wealth, whatever it might be, is the communities you're a part of, the people you're around, the books you read. All those things are super important to build your mindset as well. So check out Brian's website, check out his book. Brian, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Phil. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Moeller Real Estate, visit our website at www.moellerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.